From OBS Studio, creating a new live broadcast.
Okay.
Please wait.
So, and we are now live.
Hello,
and
everyone.
Broadcasting. Let's see. Hi, everyone. I just sent a message to our non-existent chat and select stream. This one, and we are doing good.
Excellent. Hi, Mr. Benny.
Hello, Mrs. Bear.
Today we have a whiny little dog next to us because it snowed and he's a bit fuzzy.
Yeah, it is. It snows where we are at. Anyways, so today we have a few things on our agenda. I'm just going to jump right into it so we can have a shorter podcast today. Let's see. There you go. So here's what's on our agenda. First, we're going to talk about DeepSeek R1 in the news, because that seems like the main news of the day, so to speak, that caused a ridiculous reaction in the markets. In fact, let's...
The NASDAQ fell by 3% today.
Well, NASDAQ is one thing, right? So NASDAQ fell, and that's one thing. But let's look up right here, new tab. Let's see, NVIDIA. NVDA. Stop. All right, so it caused NVIDIA to, as you can read all the headlines,
Plummeted 16.9% or 17% today.
Let's take a look at the actual... does Google not give you stock price charts anymore?
Finance, maybe.
There you go. 5 days. Okay, so there you go. You could see. Da-da-da-da-da, boom. I mean, it's not quite as bad as it was 6 months ago, but, and by bad, I mean good, but you get my point. Like, so in the last couple, like today, there was basically a collapse in the stock price, as you can see, 14% at the end of the day, negative $20 per share.
Mm-hmm.
All because of this.
DeepSeek R1.
DeepSeek, and I think we used it on the stream. We used it on the stream, on our previous stream, and I showed people, and I said, hey, this is from Chinese friends, right?
Yeah, but I think over the weekend it was making the headlines and the non-technical people had a chance to digest the information.
Well, it came out over the weekend. Let me pull that out. I saw it on your screen. Finwiz, right?
Yeah.
Finwiz. There you go. So you can see today, and you can see NVIDIA dropping down huge, Microsoft a little bit, Google a little bit. And I kind of like this screen, so let's keep this one on. Can I make this one full screen? Yeah, there you go. So we can see Google dropping a lot. You can see AMD dropping quite a bit. As you can see, the entire semiconductor range dropped. Micron, my beloved Micron.
Fell like 13% today.
Where is it in this? How come Meta is up, though?
I'm not sure.
Why is Meta up and Google down? Meta is just as fucked by this as anyone.
Look at that. It's 659. Wow.
But why do you think that is? Tesla is down. Amazon is flat. Apple is up. I don't know why Apple is up on this. Is it because people think that Apple might be able to do... I mean, I can tell you that there are some things that we can make... conclude based on this. So, but I'm not too sure that this is a justify in AVGO Broadcom. Broadcom was down huge. Why?
Okay, so mainly the concern here is that since DeepSeek is a fragment of what it took to train ChatGPT, we're talking like 100 billion to like 5 million.
No, well, I mean, let's not overblow this. So on the left here we have DeepSeek, right? Mm-hmm. And on the right we have ChatGPT, specifically ChatGPT. This is the free account. I don't want to pay them. Well, I mean, we do pay them, but this is not on my account. So it doesn't show you ChatGPT 4 here, but basically ChatGPT 4, right? And ChatGPT 4 took, and ChatGPT 4.0, well, actually, let me just go ahead and switch over to our account here. So this is my account that we pay $20 a month for. And on this one, you can see we have GPT 4.0 and the GPT O1. So this O1 model, that one took roughly $100 billion, probably. I'm sorry, $100 million to train, right? That's just one iteration, and that required buying a tremendous amount of graphics cards and basically investment from a lot of companies into OpenAI, Microsoft, and in fact, we can ask one of these things. How can you type for me, actually?
Sure.
Can you ask it how many billions of dollars have people invested in?
My keyboard is behaving wacky. Just a moment.
We have, for some reason, Bluetooth issues.
How many billions of dollars
have people invested into OpenAI? And let's ask this guy.
This is DeepSeek. You should have asked DeepSeek, not OpenAI.
Well, this is DeepSeek. But we asked it how much money. We're just asking the news.
Okay.
So as you can see what DeepSeek does, same thing as the OpenAI's thinking model, which is the O1, which is like the latest and greatest model, is it first, I don't know why, it just said continue. Searching the web. So it's now searching the web. Okay, that's interesting. There goes live demo. How about we try... Okay, let's try this. How much money have different companies invested in OpenAI? And if it is public knowledge, can you break it down for me by company and the amount invested? So we're going to just get that transcribed, but I do want to actually get DeepSeek to answer the question, because it's actually pretty good, but it's having issues right now for some reason. So what it does is it breaks down your question. Okay, that's weird. We are now just getting it. Okay, let's do it here, just so we get the answer. This unfortunately does not give our audience a really good representation of what DeepSeek is capable of, because it's not working right now. But as you can see, OpenAI got 1.2 billion, and NVIDIA partnered with them in 2024, which means they got a bunch of
2024. So they also invested some amount of money.
SoftBank, the amount isn't disclosed. Microsoft, multi-billion-dollar investment into OpenAI. So basically, there's a lot of kind of these companies, like these older companies, who have invested multiple billions of dollars into OpenAI, right?
Yep.
And it's still not enough for them to maintain the output that they're producing right now and to develop new models. So they're still, asking for more money from Microsoft and from other places. So this is why this news was such a hit, I think, to the markets, because this model, which currently isn't able to do anything.
Can you say hello? Just run a query.
Let's see. You working? Let's see. Yes, I'm working. How can I assist you today?
Oh, interesting.
Let's try again. There's no reason why it shouldn't have been able to process this query. The only thing I can think of is, you know what I'm wondering too?
Nope. It doesn't want to process this.
Do you think it's because it has OpenAI in it? Can we ask it a different finance question?
Sure.
Can you tell me what the stock price of Nvidia is today? I was hoping you would type it out. So can you tell me what the stock price of Nvidia
Sorry.
is today? And how much has it fallen? Whatever. Okay, let's see that. I wonder if it doesn't have the ability to access capital markets websites from China, because it is running on Chinese servers.
Yep.
Interesting. Can it look up anything? Can you tell me what the latest Disney movie was? Latest Disney movie. I mean, they shouldn't be blocking that. So it's either... it's clearly broken. Okay, look at that. So people write stories about it, and next thing you know, they crush their API. This is fun. Okay. This is annoying. Let me do... I wonder if I'll do that. Copy. Let's do one more time. So what it does is it does this thinking process, which usually shows up here. So I'm guessing, I think they're overloaded there.
I see.
So
all of a sudden
that happened.
All of a sudden they're less robust infrastructure.
Let's try to ask it a question without having it to go to the web. Let me see.
Oh, can you tell? Let me see. Can you tell me about Javon's paradox?
Oh yeah, there you go. You'll figure it out.
Let's see.
Okay, perfect. So they're probably having problems with their web access. What's probably happening is the AI is going out to the web to do a search. But if they have been having a tremendous number of people going to them and doing searches from them, you have to remember that they're doing their searches from inside of CPP, from the side of Communist Party intranet. So their searches are limited by what the firewall will permit. And if all of a sudden they're hitting like crazy the firewall with a bunch of websites that they're not technically supposed to have access to, like a bunch of American news websites and such, all of a sudden I think maybe they just got banned by the CPP or, automatically auto-banned. That would be my guess.
So let's see.
But let me demonstrate, though, before how it works. So what's special about these models, on ChatGPT, you have the ChatGPT R1 model that we've seen on that other screen right here. This is the R1 model. And as you can see, it's grayed out for me even, because during high usage rates, like when people are using ChatGPT a lot, even if you're the Plus customer on OpenAI, they gray out the R1 model because it requires more compute than they can provide. Right? And the reason why it requires more compute than they can provide is because, as you could see over here, this is the answer that it produced. And it's a pretty significantly long answer about the Javon's paradox. But before it produced this answer, it did this 16 seconds of thinking, right? So you'll see that in ChatGPT as well. It'll just say thinking, and it'll tell you how long it's thinking about. You can click on it and see like a little abstract of what it's thinking. But with DeepSeek, you can actually see the actual thinking process. So it outputs the thinking process. So it says, okay, the user is asking about the Javon's paradox. Let me start by recalling what I know about it, and it kind of lists some of the ideas behind it, and then it organizes it and presents it to you. Right? So this is what's called a thinking model. And if you ask it a more complex question, it will do more deliberation. It will even try some things. Like, so if you actually wanted to think for a long time, you can try something like this. Ask it to come up with a really complicated word problem to be asked of a different LLM.
Complicated word problem?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, an LLM.
So it's going to do thinking, and you can see for something like this, it's going to do a ton of thinking. We're probably not going to hang around here. We're just going to come back in a few seconds and see. But what it'll do is it'll literally go through a bunch of options. Oh, look. This time it didn't think so long. It actually picked the first one that came through. Maybe they cut down on the amount of thinking that it can do too.
As their LLM gets loaded up.
As their system is getting loaded. Because when I was here testing this on Saturday and Sunday, you could get it to think for good 2 minutes straight. And output this. I mean, we can probably repeat the same and see if it thinks longer. And okay, so we're going on a little bit too long about this. Let's come back while it's doing that. Let's come back to the markets and see why this is stupid. So the markets freaked out over this, right? And as you can see, dropped, especially NVIDIA dropped dramatically, and Broadcom also dropped dramatically. They both make chips for AI, right? And you saw AMD drop dramatically.
Oh, and there's as you
where? Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And Micron is they manufacture memory, which is very important for all of these models, right?
Right.
And the market just dumped NVIDIA and dumped Broadcom and Micron and AMD because why? Like, the logic is befuddling to me, because what they're looking at is they're looking at this, right? And they're seeing that this model, this DeepSeek, was trained for $5 million and is available from a Chinese company. And they also released this. I guess I buried the lead a little bit. I think I told about it in the previous podcast. But this is open source. This is entirely open source. You can run it on your own computer. In fact, I have a demo version of this running directly on my laptop. Unfortunately, we're recording right now and doing everything else, so I won't run it because it does slow down the computer significantly. But this is completely open source. It can run in its really dumb version on your high-end computer, on your high-end brand new laptop. But to run the full version of this model, even though it's open source, you do need like one of those NVIDIA superclusters with a ton of memory and stuff. But the big story is that these Chinese guys who built this out, the DeepSeek company, they managed to do so without access to the brand new NVIDIA superclusters. They did it on regular commercial grade, I guess, not commercial grade, but like consumer grade graphics cards. Probably the NVIDIA 490 graphics cards.
But there was an important modification that they made. Could you tell us more about it?
Yeah, they. So I've looked at it actually, and there are several data centers in China who actually offer this. They offer. I'm not familiar with the latest NVIDIA graphics card, so let me look it up. NVIDIA.
It was the same graphics cards that were banned
4090
from exportation to China. Or NVIDIA was not allowed to sell under the Biden administration.
No. Yeah, I understand that. But what they were using is things like this. You see this graphics card is the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 490 Founders Edition, right? And these things are very expensive, as you can see. They're like $3,000. I think you can get them cheaper nowadays. Yeah, 49 right there, 24 gigs. But you can see it's 24 gigabytes, right? The one that everybody uses for AI is in America at least, is the NVIDIA A100. NVIDIA. There you go. So that's the A100, right? So one of these A100s costs like $16,000 on eBay.
Yeah.
We can look it up, right? But functionally speaking, it has the same abilities as this graphics card,
which is readily available to anyone.
Which is readily available for $3,000 or less. The difference is that this graphics card has only 24 gigabytes of video memory. The reason why it has 24 gigs is because that's enough, that's plenty for basically any video game that we currently have on the market, right? But that's not enough to do AI training, especially because when you do AI training, you do backwards propagation through the model, and that actually eats up a lot of memory. So what these guys did, I don't think they specifically did it. I think this is a common practice in China for the high-end data centers, is a lot of the times you can find these 4090 graphics cards with 48 gigabytes of DDR6 memory. And I think what a lot of the times they do is they buy the actual cards and they swap out the memory chips for twice the capacity memory chips and then upgrade or hack the firmware to get it to recognize all 48 gigabytes.
But I also heard that there was a lot of like software innovation that DeepSeek or whoever developed DeepSeek came up with. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I mean, we don't know yet too much about that. They published all of their methodology and people are going through it right now. But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Like for instance, you said that they went down from 32-bit to 8-bit processing.
What they did is they did some mixed precision. So for all these models, I wish I could had it pulled up, my open source like library. But well, actually, hold on a second. Let's see if we can go to OpenRouter. OpenRouter. So for all these models, you can make them distilled to different sizes, right? So OpenRouter is this website that allows you to get access to all kinds of different LLM models, large language models.
So what do you mean by distilled? So a lighter version?
Yeah, so these are distilled models. So this model overall is 405 billion parameters. But this one they distilled to 70 billion parameters. 70 billion is kind of like a limit of what you can run on a really, really, really high-end PC, basically. But on top of that, they also have something called a quantizer. And
by PC, do you mean like a laptop, like a high-end laptop?
No. You need a high-end. So to run 70B, you either need a high-end desktop with multiple graphics cards, or you need one of those. Basically, you would need one or two of those like Mac Studios with 192 gigabytes of RAM. Total, yeah.
Okay.
Not total, but per unit. And you'll probably need two connected together because the primary issue here is memory. All of these things are very memory hungry and require tremendous amounts of graphics memory specifically, or at least memory that your graphics card can have access to. But to compress that, a lot of the times people quantize them in different ways. So, for instance, if we click search for DeepSeek, let's see. They should show us all different versions of it. I don't know why they don't. Okay. I'm not sure how to find it right now, but basically you can find these models in different quantizations from 16-bit to, or from 32-bit, which gives you like the full resolution of the model, gives you the most precise answers. And you can go down to as low as 4-bit, which gives you a lot less precision, but at the same time, it's a lot lighter on your processing power. Right, and it's a lot faster, and we're noticing nowadays that 4-bit models actually do really well. So NVIDIA is pushing hard on 4-bit models. I think for this one, what they did is they separated and processed different portions of the model, different training portions at different quantization levels, which allowed them to speed up the process. Because they kind of were able to get the rough approximation of where the weights have to be at like a lower in quantization, and then scale up to get more precise values out of it. People will probably digest more precisely what were the improvements that what is it called? DeepSeek did to achieve the 5 million price point. But essentially it was following, like they were building on top of, so some of the things that probably helped them achieve such a low price point is, first, they were building on top of Llama, what's its name? Facebook released, right? Which was the first open source LLM. It wasn't particularly good, but it gets you a starting point. And second, they were building on the insight that was recently had by OpenAI and others, that if you allow your model to think before it generates an answer, then it generates a much better answer. Right? Just like a human being. And this thinking process, it wasn't particularly difficult to implement, really.
Why is that?
Because basically it's like word programming. You're asking the same LLM that you already have to first develop a strategy on how to approach the problem. And then you ask it to implement each step of that strategy step by step. So the overall, their models programming, like the part of it that deals, for instance, with thinking and such, isn't very complicated. So overall, what these guys did is they just showed that not so much that they're incredible geniuses, as much as that this whole process is not as complex and as expensive as people have thought it would be. Right? And they were able to show that basically you don't need these $16,000 graphics cards in order to build one of these LLMs. You can do so with these cheaper consumer grade graphics cards, right? If they're hacked and stuff. The problem with that, of course, is that while you can do that in China, you can't do that in the United States.
I see.
But most of the savings are not even coming from, I think, the graphics cards, to be honest.
Because we're still consuming the same amount. I'm sorry. I thought that the reason the market panicked was because all of a sudden they thought, well, if the overhead costs are going to go down, that means that NVIDIA won't be able to sell nearly as many graphics cards. And what you're saying is that NVIDIA, you can't get away with hacking these NVIDIA cards in America and converting a 24 gig consumer grade graphics card to a 48 gig graphics card, because no server data center will allow you to do that or offer you that?
Yeah, no data center, well, any data center who does that will instantly get sued by NVIDIA, of course, right? That's first. But second, 48 gigabytes is nothing, really. Like these guys, I don't know how much they punch now, like they have nowadays, but they have 80 gigs, for instance, right? And there's new ones on the horizon that will have 160 gigs. So, and you can only double the size of these cards, and there's only so many of them available. So this is like one of those one-time things. Like they can do it now. Right now they're competitive.
So they bootstrap themselves.
Bootstrap themselves, and they can show off their, and maybe make enough money to start buying proper NVIDIA hardware.
Gotcha.
Right, but this is not a long-term strategy, like a company strategy.
I see.
You can't have a long-term company strategy of buying consumer-grade hardware and trying to convert it to something that you're going to be using for commercial AI.
So we shouldn't be dumping NVIDIA stock. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, what I'm saying is also that in the past, the paradigm for the past, I would say, until like a couple of months ago, like literally a month ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
The paradigm was that you will need a bunch of these to train your AI model, like train ChatGPT 4 or train the O1 variant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once you have trained it, you will have like a trained model that will run on relatively inexpensive hardware, and it will take you very little effort to actually run these models, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything was inference time. By inference time means like real-time inference, where you put data into it and it just spits out an answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we realized that the idea was that the way you make these models better and smarter is by spending more and more time on training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then we simply ran out of training data.
Mm-hmm.
Like we literally ran out of data.
Okay.
Like they used everything that was available on the internet, and then there was nothing else available on the internet.
Okay.
And these guys like dug through all of it, and they made a model that's as smart as possible, given all the information on the internet, and it still wasn't, what it needs to be.
Okay.
So then people at OpenAI, and I think they were the originators of this idea, but I might be wrong, so I might be giving them credit incorrectly. They realized that you can do this. You can do thinking, right?
Okay.
And you can ask the same model to
You
first...
can do reasoning. I think they call it reasoning.
Well, they call it reasoning or thinking, but what it really does, you can kind of turn off the reasoning, right? And you can ask it exactly the same question, right? Where's that question?
I think that's what R stands for.
Oh, yeah. So when we ask it another question, right now it'll just spit it out, right? Boom, and it's done, right? Let's let it finish up. Jesus Christ, how many questions are you making? Okay, so there you go. It spit out some kind of question, right? Before it wrote this, right? And it spent all this time thinking, right?
Reasoning out.
Yeah. Right? And sometimes it reasons for 14 seconds. Sometimes it reasons for like a minute or so, right? Before it comes out, it comes up with a question. But if you do the non-thinking model, right?
There's no reasoning.
There is no reasoning. It just spits out whatever comes to its head. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right?
It works just like humans, like
Exactly.
in human beings.
Exactly. So what they found out is if you take the non-reasoning model and then you take the stuff that it just spit out and you feed it right back. So you just copy it and you paste it over here and you say, hey, can you critique this and tell me how you would improve this idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would give you some critiques and ideas, and then you would say, can you incorporate them into the plan, right? And it will incorporate them. And then you do it one more time, and you can do these polishes over and over again, and that would make the result better and better and better, and more reasonable. So what happened basically as a paradigm shift as of a few months ago is people realized that it's not true that during training time you need a bunch of these, but during like actually talking, they call it in the industry test time, right? Okay. So during test time you only need like a few GPUs and you can serve hundreds of people because what you're doing is you're just spitting out answers.
Okay.
We found out that in reality, in actuality, by letting it think about what it's about to tell you, right? Mm-hmm. It outputs better results, right? And by outputting, but that requires a lot more processing power during what's called test time, right? So I think the market...
So I'm sorry, it's not clear to me. So does test time mean it requires less computing power and less electricity as a result, or is it the opposite? It requires more electricity and more computing resources.
Okay, I think I'm getting a little lost here. So here's what I'm saying. In the past, as of like a month ago,
Okay.
the general assumption in the investment and in the AI sphere
Okay.
was that it takes a lot of effort to make a model, to train a model.
Okay.
It takes a lot of compute to train a model. But then once you have a model trained, and once it's, functional, and once it's ready to just spit out answers to you like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it doesn't take a lot of compute to just spit out answers because you're just propagating forward through the equation.
Right. Okay.
You know how it is, that
Gotcha.
backward propagation is always a lot more complex than forward propagation. Forward propagating through one of these models is a lot less complex.
Okay.
It
So
has less steps and such.
This turned out to be incorrect. Why?
This turned out to be incorrect because what we found out is if we make a very, very complex, or the best model that we can, given the best data that we have, we ran out of data basically, right? And we already processed everything there is to process, right? Now the only way we can improve the quality of our models is by allowing them to think longer. And thinking is necessarily compute. It's compute at test time or when the users are interacting with it. So the assumption was that companies will invest a lot of money into NVIDIA cards in order to like cards like these, in order to train the model.
Okay.
But then when it was going to be time to actually running it, it's not going to be a big deal. It's just going to be running on some server grade, hardware and.
Oh, that's what I misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah, so when people are actually asking questions to ChatGPT, the assumption was, oh, that's no big deal in terms of like data load or
Once we
compute
have a
load.
trained model, we can downgrade the hardware to more basic hardware.
Or maybe not downgrade, but like relatively speaking, like in relative terms, people were assuming that test time, which is usage time, of the AI is not going to be as big of a deal as training time. Because training was a lot more difficult and forward propagation was a lot easier, right? But then we found out that actually in order to get really great results out of these LLMs, what you need is you need to literally allow them to think longer during test time. And the more you allow them to think, the better the result. So now the assumption doesn't hold that you need a bunch of these to train, but you only need a few of them to like run your actual day-to-day business of providing the service that the AI does. As it turns out, in order to, as one might assume, in order to sell thinking essentially, because that's what you do, right? As an LLM, API operator, you're essentially selling thinking. Surprise, surprise! It turns out that to sell thinking, you actually need to produce thinking, and that thinking needs to be produced as people ask you questions, not beforehand.
Gotcha. Just like a real human.
So what
you require food to think, right, to create energy, and when you're growing up, and you will still require food after you've grown up to think.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good assumption. That it takes more energy to raise a human than it does to upkeep a human to a certain extent, right? But at the same time, you still need to spend energy to upkeep a human, otherwise they die.
Yeah, you still
don't
need a
feed
lot
them.
of apples and chocolate and raisins and all nuts when you're thinking critically.
Yeah, let me. I'm trying to see if I can get some kind of image going here.
I think the other concern people have, or fallacy, thinking fallacy that we have is that, okay, so DeepSeek has proven that you can lower the cost of AI LLMs, right? Of large language models. Which from here on I shall call llamas. So the llamas are now more cost effective does that mean that more people can buy these llamas and jump on the llama wagon, or what does it mean?
Give me a second. I'm trying to set up a screen here. There you go.
Usually that's what happens when something becomes more affordable. When cars became more affordable, more people could buy cars, which meant that oil producers
Okay,
produce
so
more oil.
here's what I wanted to draw really quickly, if you guys give me just a moment. So the assumption was that in the past was that if this is like how much it's going to take us, like this much money to build an LLM, and then per use, it's going to take us, or per million use or whatever, it's going to take us very like this much effort to actually run the LLM, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the assumption that the market is still operating on, even today,
Okay.
even as of today, right? So what they saw is they saw a Chinese company come in and show us that, no, we actually managed to build our LLM for only this much, right? So we built the LLM for very little money. We didn't need all this money that you guys usually spend on building the LLM, right? And I think the market made the assumption that, like, oh, well, if this is the build cost and this is going to be the operational cost in terms of compute,
Yeah.
then NVIDIA needs to go down because, well, what's the point of buying all their cards? We won't need that much compute in the future.
Okay.
And what I spent the last 10 minutes trying to explain, I think, and doing so poorly, is that at the same period of time as this paradigm became no longer accurate, because now we learned that there are actually cheaper methods to train models. This paradigm also became inaccurate, this portion of the paradigm. And in reality, it's going to take a lot more compute to actually operate and run these models.
I get it. I see.
So
And even if we make it less expensive for people to set up LLMs, we will have more of them as well.
we'll have a lot more of them because
Yeah.
they'll be if something becomes more available, because it becomes less expensive, people just buy more of it. It's just like when computers were very expensive and took up houses, or like buildings, the size, huge buildings. Only very few people had computers, and nobody would believe that you could use computers to put into like your greeting card and it will play you music and it'll be thrown away. But now the computers are very inexpensive; they're shoved into everything, and as a whole, as a percentage of the GDP, the computer industry is a lot larger than it used to be.
Gotcha,
Even though the computers themselves are a lot cheaper. So it's the same thing. Notice that NVIDIA also dropped the cost on a lot of their graphics cards recently, even though they have been going up. I think we're seeing that maybe we'll have an increase of availability of these types of things throughout the market. And it's incorrect to think that NVIDIA would do worse as a result of this specific news. I have some other issues with NVIDIA, but quite honestly, like I don't think DeepSeek is the thing that's going to harm NVIDIA. It might harm OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
It might harm Google. I would say it might harm Google more so than anything else.
Why is that?
Well, because I don't know why their search feature doesn't work today, but generally speaking, their search feature works really great.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just search for things, and it's just as good as what do you call it? Like some of those startups that do search for you.
Gotcha.
What was
like
the one?
Perplexity AI.
Like Perplexity. Like it basically does. Like if anything, this is a bigger threat to Perplexity than anything.
Yeah.
And also just ChatGPT in general, because their thinking model is really great. Like I actually pitted them together. I got this one to like fight this one, or like debate and talk to this one, and they're both really good. In terms of human-like performance, they're both excellent. I also find it interesting because I did have them both talk about God and debate God, and you can see a clear leanings of this one towards like Buddhism and not monotheism, but monism, where I think it very clearly prefers like Taoism, so it has like those overtones to its argument, whereas this one is a more Christian.
Oh, very interesting. It was raised on, Western thoughts.
Yeah, somebody pointed this out very interestingly, that the ChatGPT is trained primarily on Western material, and some other material thrown in. This thing is trained on both Western material because it has to, and also because they're basically using, I think, some of the data from the Facebook's Llama. But then it's also trained on all the Chinese classics, and all the writing, all the literature surrounding the Chinese classics, and that's many centuries worth of work that this doesn't really pay much attention to. So it's kind of interesting to see the perspectives.
Very interesting.
I think. Go ahead.
I think we'll see where we're at in 3 to 6 months. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, but today's reaction, what it showed me at most is this market is full of people who don't really know what they're investing in. They're just kind of investing in because it goes up. And this is a very stampede market because this was a weird reaction.
Well,
if for Nvidia it was a weird reaction,
well,
why is Apple up?
I don't know.
Why is Google down?
Who knows? It's just, I guess, whatever company people feel comfortable with.
I think
Google could be down because of the DeepSeek being a competitor.
I think actually what happened is they don't see Apple in the same
the AI sphere.
In the AI sphere, because Apple just did their Apple Intelligence and nobody noticed.
Right.
And thankfully for them, I guess. And I think what happened is the market sold off these companies out of fear, but then they had to put their money somewhere, so they just all dumped it into Apple.
Makes sense. And all those other ones on
and
the
all
upper
all the other ones
right.
did pretty well.
Right hand side.
Yeah.
The Walmarts, the Costco, the
Meta.
Home Depot.
This is why Meta jumped up even though Meta has a large exposure to it, probably larger than anyone. I don't understand, because they're dumping a lot of money into AI as well.
People don't understand that though, not yet, anyways.
Very strange.
But speaking of Meta, Meta CEO brought up an interesting topic that we're going to talk about today. And that is the feminization of the workplace and how we should bring back masculinization. So
I don't think he specifically said bring back, I guess maybe masculinization.
Did he? I just recently heard that maybe it's a tactic to let people know that in the next year or so they're going to be letting go about 3,500 or so workers who are underperforming.
I don't know. I'm creating some animations for a video.
And do you have any thoughts about it?
Yes, I believe that this is all about Catwoman.
Really? Well, are Catwomen underperformers?
Well, by definition. So, in the little description for the video, you might have read that this is all about Catwoman. And this is my grand theory that I think was originally made public by our horrible Vice President J.D. Vance. But he's not wrong about this. That large swaths of governmental and I think also private corporate bureaucracy, including in large companies, have been occupied by what I call catwomen, and what he actually called catwomen. Now, what's important to note is that catwomen are neither people who own cats, nor do they have to be women. This is just kind of a terminology, because a lot of the time, like, unreasonably many times, or the preponderance of times, let's put it that way, these people do end up being middle-aged women with cats. But they can also be middle-aged men with dogs and anyone in between. What makes them kind of like what they are is the fact that they find successful companies, attach themselves to successful companies, and then their kind of entire goal in life is to kind of maintain things the way they are, not take any risk, and continue to milk the company for its money. It's kind of like if you were a parasite and you were living inside a buffalo, and you would be like, no, little buffalo, don't take any chances. Do not go to the next grazing patch where there must be more food or something like that, because I need you not to die, because I rely upon you to continue parasiting off of you.
Oh, I see. So, like, when the corporation has entered its more mature phase, after it's no longer a startup, it becomes a safe place for so-called Catwomen to go and play and set up distinctly Catwomen environments. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So I think you're bringing up my other theory, my theory of like corporate development, basically. Or I think it's any organizational development where an organization starts with people who really care about it. They organize the organization. They're passionate about it. And then eventually those people are slowly but surely supplanted by people who don't really care about the organization, but care about the benefits that the organization provides them specifically.
Yeah, it's true about many things. It's like the revolutionaries, come up with or are inspired by a message or a problem that they want to fix. And then after they've revolutionized successfully, the bureaucrats come in, the people that can run the corporation or the system every day come in and take over, and thus an organization reaches its mature stage.
Yeah, but the important thing is that the organization in the mature stage, almost universally, unless you guard against this very, very, very aggressively, transitions from an organization whose goal it is to, develop some kind of product or service, or to even return money to the shareholders, and it transitions into an organization whose main goal is to preserve the organization, to preserve the entity of the organization unchanged. So, for instance, if the organization can be restructured to where it can be way more profitable, deliver way more resources to the consumers, to the customers of the organization, or products, I guess. But that means that you need to close some underperforming departments. At some stage of the organization, the types of people who will fight tooth and nail to prevent that from happening, because they don't want the structure to change, because they have their friends and they have their relatives and they have various vested interests in the company staying the way it is, right? And and those vested interests are more important to them than the company itself, than the well-being of the company itself. Then those people are what I describe as Catwomen, and a lot of the times that's who they end up being.
I don't like how how we're using this female masculine dichotomy, generally speaking, as we speak of the workplace, because I feel that there are good feminine characteristics and there are bad feminine characteristics, and the same applies to male characteristics. And we're just focusing solely on the more negative characteristics of both genders, I feel.
Well, you're right about that, but you have to make that argument. You have to lay that argument out. We have talked about it privately, but not here, how that I think is a dynamic that's actually happening, right?
Right.
Where we talk of it in these qualities, like, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg, who was talking on the Joe Rogan podcast about how the American corporations became too neutered, and as a result, and too feminine, and there's not enough masculine competitive energy in these.
Okay.
That's what he was saying, and like risk taking. I think those are not necessarily. It's kind of like what you might feel like if you encounter what's actually happening, but I think it's a slightly misleading idea of what's actually happening. I don't think we're necessarily feminized. I think we're catwomanized. And by that, what I mean is these people who, again, don't necessarily have to be women in order to be catwomen. These people who kind of leech on corporations, their main tool of operation is shielding themselves from discovery by wrapping themselves into the cloak of like this diversity and inclusion that is very popular right now on the left.
Oh, so you're saying that their call for social justice is just how do you call it? Distraction from people noticing that they're underperforming, or what?
In essence, yes, even though it sounds bad, because it's like on one side you can say, well, the things that they're saying are generally good, right?
Right.
And that's true. But the reason why a lot of these people are spending like all of their time, for instance, talking about the importance of social justice, the importance of women's rights, and like equal representation in the workforce, etc., 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 it's because they don't want anybody to start questioning their output. And it doesn't have to be a female. It could be a man, but it could be like a man who organizes all the offices, diversity days. And if somebody comes and starts saying like, okay, Bob, like, what have you actually done at work? Like, we're working here on a word processor, not women's rights issues. And then Bob is like one of these people who will be like, what? What are you talking about? I am fighting for women's rights. It's because of people like you, blah, 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 blah. How dare you demand that I also perform actual work that you pay me for to do? And that's how they preserve their lives and their work through these kind of initiatives. So I think it's wrong to say that, oh, it's all women's fault, or this is just a shield. This is like this dirty little shield behind which I guess the shield is not dirty, but like the people hide behind. They hide behind this feminization of the workplace. They feminize the workplace themselves. They intentionally feminize the workplace. So that way there is a they hang like during those like Trump protests, they would like hang their stupid little pink hats everywhere, and then they said like people who would be like wearing T-shirts that have all kinds of slogans just so people would point it out, and then they make a big deal out of things. This is the kinds of people who organized walkouts in Facebook and Google, because Facebook and Google were like working on some AI with the military or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think what's happening is in a lot of those cases, when you dig really deep, what you find is you find a lot of people who deeply don't care about those specific issues about which they're organizing protests and stuff. And instead you find people who are just living in a very comfortable bureaucracy, and then just making sure that bureaucracy continues to exist in exactly the same way that they have figured out how to work it.
Unfortunately, that means that they get culled or let go whenever the corporation decides to do house cleansing.
That is true, but that's why you have to get your people all the way up.
I see. And do they get all the way up?
Of course. That's how corporations die. I mean, how many times do you see corporations, right? My favorite example is what do you call it? Sears, right? Sears was a corporation who made its name. They like literally everything that made them who they are was their catalog, which they delivered through a brand new, before unavailable delivery network called the United States Postal Service. Right? And that's what made them amazing. That's what made them like the premier company in America, because they've brought products about which people haven't even heard about.
Around what era?
1950s.
I see. I thought they were like they peaked earlier than that. Interesting.
Well, 1940s. I don't know.
I can look it up while you tell us.
But
more
it's
about
not super important, is
Okay.
it? What's important is that they, as a company, became. I mean, they had the tallest building in the world, Sears Tower, right?
Well, to me, the time thing is interesting because it tells me how many generations pass before a new technology comes to play, and they should notice that new technology, you know.
Well, it's
Come
been
to
at least
play.
50 years, so 50 plus years.
They were done by the 90s, I feel. Sears.
Okay.
Anyways, go on.
Well, why do you say they were done by the 90s? They could have pivoted easily.
Yeah, the 90s was last year, a decade they could have pivoted.
Yes, because that's the decade in which the internet came about.
Yeah, yeah.
So I get it, but what I'm trying to say is 90s was the decade for them to pivot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a pivot. I think you're actually putting a word into my mouth here that's incorrect. Because for the Sears Corporation, it wasn't about pivoting. It was about going back to what they were good at. It was going back to their roots, taking their catalog of products and putting it on the internet, the next delivery system that the government has came up with and paid for at that point.
That makes sense.
And they failed.
Unfortunately, they exhibited this Catwoman attitude that I share sometimes. It's the, do not touch it, please. It's working now. Why are you trying to ruin it for everyone?
Yeah, so
Without doing the appropriate research that there's something that's going to ruin, my wonderful black box that's currently working, my jewel box that's currently working, right?
Well, in part, it's because you haven't built the box, right?
Right, yes.
Like, at that point, Sears had a bunch of stores, a bunch of physical stores throughout the United States, right? And they thought to themselves, well, surely it's more prestigious to run stores, like physical stores, than to run some stupid catalog. What they didn't understand is everybody's going to be buying things from a catalog. It's just going to be a different type of catalog. It's going to be an online catalog, right? But at that point, they were already operated not by the people who saw the United States Postal Service as a magnificent opportunity to reach consumers that they could never reach before, right? But instead, they were operated by the types of people who find it prestigious to operate stores, and for them, their job, like for them, their position at Sears wasn't about, oh, we're Sears, we're figuring out how to deliver unique products to as many customers as possible. For them, it was like, we're Sears, we're a serious organization, and I wear a big boy suit to my job.
Gotcha. And
So-
I think
and those are also Catwomen.
Yeah, and I think when you fall into that category of people who feel really proud about wearing or doing a certain thing, you should reconsider your position.
Like for them, it was about operating Sears, the brick and mortar business, not operating Sears, the purveyor of products for the middle America, so to speak.
Don't we have an interesting observation about a company, a current large American corporation that's sitting on their laurels presently as the technology scape is changing dramatically. Google, for instance. It's sitting on its laurels thinking that people will continue to search Google the same way that they did in the 2000s and 2010s when the search model is changing.
That is true. We have Google to look at that because they jumped in, right? The real story goes. The real story is that they didn't jump in 2018, right? Because in 2018, Google published their first article on it was called "Attention is All You Need." It was the first article on what we consider right now the transformer process, or the GPT. The T in the GPT is the transformer network that we use for all of the AI, generative AI that we're using right now. And even back then, they had people who wrote that article who were saying, like, this is the future. This is how people will interact with the web. And Google just, the powers that be in Google just buried that effort completely. Like, the article was published. That's the article that OpenAI took. And they just ran with it. They basically took a bunch of their donors' money and trained that GPT model that Google originally published on all of the internet, and that turned into GPT-1 and then GPT-2 and then ChatGPT 3.5, 4, and so on and so forth.
I see.
And so Google did that because why? Because the people at the top, the powers that be, are, while stupid, are not entirely stupid. They're Catwomen, so they're stupid but crafty. And they noticed right away that this will most definitely threaten their search model, because when people can just ask an AI, hey, what's in the news today? Hey, can you tell me how much X costs, right? How much a vacuum cleaner costs, right?
Right.
You're not going to Google, you're not going to search on Google for that information. You're just going to ask your AI.
Right.
And their approach to that wasn't, oh, well, this is where it's headed, right? And maybe this is why people kind of talk about it from a point of view of a feminine energy, because their approach from it wasn't, oh, this is where it's going anyway. How about, since we're the ones who came up with the model that's going to get us there, why don't we get there first? Right? We were first to functional search. Let's be first to functional AI. Right? Instead, their approach was, again, one might argue is a more feminine approach of, let's protect what we have and bury this and pretend this doesn't exist.
I see. So blow it off for as long as possible.
Yeah, just but maybe like, I don't know. I feel like what makes this not just a feminine energy, but more like a Catwoman approach, is because a proper Catwoman never considers about the interests of the corporation itself, or like the company and the future of the company. They only care about the company in today and now. So, I mean, if you are a corporate executive at Google and you don't think you're going to be there in 5 years, you're going to take your stock options and, go somewhere else. Maybe for you, it's logical to say, you know what, I'm not going to shake this boat right now. Yeah, we have AI, but AI today means, doing AI today means telling all of our investors and telling all of our people that this is a threat to our business. We have to put it on our 401, like those not 10K and 10Q reports. And we're not going to see any results from it for like another 3-4 years. Now, it's true, if we jump on it right now, in 50 years or in 10 years even, Google may need to retire in 5 years, or I want to go somewhere else. And in the meantime, this is going to cause the stock to collapse. So I don't think I'm going to do anything about this. I think I'm going to bury it.
I see.
And I think this is the kind of attitude that Mark was referring to, and I think he's incorrectly labeling it as a feminine attitude, where I really think it's more of preservationist attitude.
I find that interesting because I agree with you. I feel that femininity and masculinity is not the right dichotomy for characterizing these people, because if you have women who are soft, empathetic, and vulnerable, you can also have women that are strong, resilient, and assertive. And the same way, that men can be both aggressive, logical, and assertive, they can also be compassionate, empathetic, and understanding. Which is like the same. It's like it's the same coin, basically. It's like two sides of the same coin. Like, these things exist all together. But I think a better way of thinking about this is to think about it in terms of egalitarianism and meritocracy. What I think Zuckerberg is trying to refer to is that meritocracy has disappeared from the workplace, that the individual no longer matters, and that this social justice, the focus on social justice and participation from everyone frequently leads to underperformance, basically, from certain divisions or sections of the company.
Well, I think you're right about that. But I think that's a secondary problem. So we can't make, you're right, and I think we talked about this earlier, that you can't make every single part of your corporation a meritocracy-like endeavor. And at the same time, you can't make every single part of your corporation an egalitarian type of endeavor. For instance, your production lines or your assembly lines where people construct the stuff that you're designing, that stuff might be a little bit more egalitarian. If people are screwing up, you can train them up and try to get everything humming in a good way. I mean, their cohesion is more important than performance. But during design and during kind of leadership, performance is very important, and we need to have meritocracy in the leadership positions. But I think that's kind of secondary to the primary of that large corporations in many ways are occupied by people who fundamentally don't care about the corporation itself. They care about what they can get out of the corporation. In many ways because that's how the corporation thinks about them.
Mm-hmm. How do you whittle out these people? I mean, once they're embedded for good, and unless you have a shakeup starting from the very top, then I don't see any way for the corporation to survive, basically.
And it's almost like this is something that doesn't just happen to corporations. It happens to all groups of people, whether it's a business entity or government entity. Oh no, did we drop our connection? Error, YouTube is not receiving. Oh. Well, it still says we're transmitting, so I'm going to assume we are still transmitting. But why is it? I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties.
Does it have any additional notes?
No. Oh, we're back to, I think we just had bad internet connection or something. And we were just not, I wonder how, we should see one of our broadcasts, and we're still kind of working out the kinks of these broadcasts, so.
Yeah, we are. Unfortunately, I have to go to the ladies' room, and I'll be right back.
Do you want to pause
Yeah.
with our wonderful pause system?
Sure.
And we're back.
Hello,
And
hello.
I'm going to switch to our other screen. Ta-da! Okay, so let's... Give me 1 second. I'm going to do that. Boom. Boom. Okay, so now we can talk again. During a little break while I was getting tea, I was pointing out that maybe I'm making a bad argument for why I believe that every company, every human organization, I don't think this is unique to companies. I think this applies to companies, corporations, governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, just groups of people of any variety. That this is a type of kind of dynamic that always develops. Can I kind of draw the dynamic really quickly, and then we can come back to it?
Sure.
Because I agree with Yuki. Yuki was pointing out,
Mrs. Bear,
that we we don't need to classify this into a female and a male dynamic. Because I think it has some other qualities to it. So let me draw it really quickly first. I think any corporation kind of starts off, or any group of people starts off kind of slow. Not that many people believe in it, and it starts growing and meteorically kind of like starting to rise up.
If
right?
it's successful, it will rise up.
Yeah, if it's successful, if it's something that people believe in, right?
Right.
Something that's good. So maybe it's a company, maybe it's a government that attracts a lot of people who want to migrate and live there. Maybe it's a religion that people want to join, what have you, right? And then as it starts growing, so at this point, like at this stage right here, not that many people pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. And the leech type of people in our society, they don't care to attach themselves to a company when it's right here, because there's not that much to leech on. You actually have to do work to make the company grow. Mm-hmm. But then almost inevitably the companies keep growing, and then eventually hit their plateau. And when they hit their plateau over here, this is where they are also maximum in terms of their prestige.
They've acquired resources.
They have acquired resources, and they have the maximum prestige. They can afford for fancy hotels for their employees and all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's where you start having all these Catwomen attach themselves to your company. And I call them Catwomen because, again, this is what they end up being a lot of the time, but they don't have to be that. These leech-like creatures. And then slowly but surely, they take the company down and they suction it dry, and then they leap off at the very last moment as the company is in the decline. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this kind of happen in almost every organization that grows past a certain point. That once companies grow past a certain point, what ends up happening is they simply start to attract these kinds of people to them, and the whole organization just starts failing. You could see it at Apple. I mean, like, look at Apple, for instance, buying Siri, the company behind Siri, back in 2014. And then basically over a period of just a few years, driving everybody behind Siri from their company, primarily because people didn't want to share the turf. And after that, Siri was neglected for another 10 years, where now they have to buy AI from ChatGPT, where before they were the premier kind of company in the market. They, like, Hey Siri was supposed to be the first AI revolution that never happened.
Oh, I find it interesting because what I'm seeing or observing from my perspective is a lot of fear-based decision making with an emphasis on maintenance, because the cat people don't know how to build anything from scratch. Therefore, they go into a mode that just says must maintain what we have at all costs, even if in the long term or in the medium term those decisions turn badly for the corporation or system.
Yeah. And I think where the feminization comes from is we're experiencing a lot of risk aversion, where if you present an idea that can either be riskier or less risky, the less risky version of that idea, even if the less risky version has a lot less payoff, is usually chosen by many like boards of directors in in corporations right now, right? And in places like Meta, for instance, even though they did change their entire fucking name of the company for no apparent reason, but well,
it's not no apparent reason. They wanted to diversify.
To diversify against what?
Away from
everybody still thinks of them as Facebook.
Yeah. Well, why did X, copy Meta?
Well, X is operated by a moron, so
right.
Anyways, I guess Meta is also operated by a moron.
So
that's your answer right there.
Enough said.
But the point is that a lot of these boards of directors are choosing the safer option, because for them, preserving their like little place in the corporation is far more important than growing the corporation itself. Meaning, if they can continue to receive their millions of dollars per year, they would rather do that, even if it means the company going like down overall over a period of time, versus them risking something. Even if maybe they are risking something, it can have like a dramatic payoff.
That's what Zuckerberg must mean by bringing masculinization back, because I was confused at first. I didn't understand what he means by bringing masculinization back to the workforce. It must mean bringing back risky decision, or like taking more risks, right? Taking more risks
doesn't mean making risky decisions, I want to say. It just means making more calculated decisions sometimes, as opposed to just choosing not to do anything. So it's like, if you have a choice between doing something and not doing something, and not doing something costs you nothing, but doing something has a potential cost but also a big potential reward, he wants people to choose to try to do something as opposed to choosing not to do something.
So would you, in this instance, the feminine characteristic or thing to do would be not to do anything?
Not to do something. To keep the course as is.
I see. Do you think that's true about the female gender?
To a certain extent, I think it's true. And I think this is why people grew to associate it with feminization or masculinization of the workforce. But I think the other reason why people think about it, so aside from kind of like this choosing the path of doing something versus path of not doing something, you also have to keep in mind that these people, like these leeches that I keep talking about, I keep coming back to them because I think they're important. When they attach themselves, in order to hide, like this is a social kind of dynamic, in order to hide, they create a victimhood pyramid. They place themselves at the very top of the victimhood pyramid, of course. As you know, such people, these are the people who always talk about how everybody's persecuting them, how everybody hates them, and this is why they're undermining their magnificent projects.
And how they're also very magnificent.
And then these people create like this, they carry around this little pyramid of victimhood all around the office, and make sure that everybody is well aware of the victimhood pyramid and well aware of the fact that they are at the very top of it. But of course, right underneath them, there's like women and black people, and then underneath them there's like maybe white people, and underneath them there's of course management who is oppressing them all. But like the victimhood pyramid is like a reverse pyramid, where the higher you are on the pyramid, the more of a victim you are. And all of this is a coping strategy to make sure that all the normal people in the company don't realize that you are one of these leeches and kick you out of the company. Right?
Right.
And this is a very feminine energy, but what they're doing is they're taking feminine energy to create these kinds of victimhood pyramids and stuff, and they're kidnapping it. They're taking it for themselves and using it, utilizing it as a shield. I don't know how to draw a shield. There's a shield.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using it as a shield against people noticing that they're not doing their job. They're shielding themselves with their victimhood pyramid. And I think this is what people associate with feminine behavior.
Okay, I have a question. So, these people, presumably they belong to a team, right?
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? I mean,
like, in large tech companies, you work in teams, you have projects in these teams, right?
Uh-huh.
They can't possibly spend all their time working for themselves, being victims, because at some point they will obstruct the team's path.
Oh, I'll tell you how
Right.
these people work. Anybody who worked in those companies, they'll know exactly how it works. So they'll have in the morning.
And as a result of obstructing the team's path, the project won't be completed. And if the project isn't completed, there will be some consequences at the end of the after the deadline passes, right? People will be fired. Is that not the case? And
That's not the case. That's the problem.
Tell us more. And what happens to the ones that are really high up in the organization? Who are they accountable to? Are they accountable to shareholders when the shareholders or the board of directors?
They're accountable to the shareholders. They're accountable to the board of directors, but they're only as accountable as their skills of coming up with excuses and reasons for why they're underperforming. And you see, the other thing is you have to keep in mind that how do you know when somebody's underperforming? Like, how do you know that Facebook could have already had like self-driving cars, but they don't because certain teams are underperforming? You don't know that. You have nobody to compare them to. It's not like 5 companies competing in the steel industry or something like that. They're all doing kind of their own very unique thing, right? So, for instance, Threads. Threads is a product that Facebook launched, right? Threads is underperforming. Threads is like a lot of people switched from X to Threads, but then they decided that that's bad because there was a lot of problems with the UI in the app itself, and it didn't offer anything new past the original Twitter experience, whereas X was offering video, was offering other things. Now, whose fault is that? Is that a team underperforming, or are they doing exactly what they were told to do? We don't know.
I see.
Right? And a lot of times nobody knows, because a lot of times you look at it and you're like, well, we've been working as a team and nothing is happening, right? But my own experiences with people spending 2 weeks to decide how a calendar should look. And that all boils down to somebody not knowing how to do their job. So instead they call meetings and basically find creative reasons why they can't finish their work.
So tell us more about how these people stay in power.
No, but I was going to point it out. So anybody who works in tech and knows this, the morning stand-up meetings, and how has it been politicized, that it used to be that if you need to do some work, but your work depends on work from other people that needs to come to you so you can continue doing the work this way, and one of these people is not finished with their work, you would say, oh, I'm blocked by such and such, and as a result, I'm waiting, right? This was perfectly normal, but of course, in a feminized work environment, it's a microaggression to say blocked. And even though it's part of the kind of the standard, what do you call it? Scrum or whatever the fuck they use nowadays, system, in a lot of workplaces, people are very, very hesitant about saying, "Oh, this is blocking me. This person is blocking me," because it's considered to be rude or it's considered to be a microaggression. And especially if it's a woman who's blocking you, then people are afraid that they're going to be like, "Oh, it must be because you're sexist, and this is why she's blocking you." And this is unfortunately the kind of the reality that these offices have developed.
I see.
Now, it's not everywhere, but it is common enough to where especially in some of these tech companies, that it's becoming a problem.
I see. Interesting.
But again, this is not because of feminization. I feel like this is the kind of like the idea that women are higher up on the victimhood pyramid above men. So as a result, appealing to feminine energy is useful to somebody who tries to climb to the very, very top of the victimhood pyramid.
I see. I wonder if Zuckerberg's comment comes from his own transformation into a more masculine male, as you would say, with his jiu-jitsu practice and wearing a big fat gold chain around his neck and dressing like a rapper or something.
I honestly think he's just trying to pretend.
Having a midlife crisis?
I don't know if he's even having a midlife crisis. I think he's trying to pretend to be more MAGA or something. I wouldn't pay attention to that. To be honest, I think even his comments are not that
inflammatory as people made them out to be.
Well, they're also not that thought out. I think
see.
he just made this observation, and I think he was trying to appeal to Joe Rogan or something, and he just said it. But the fact that they are firing the bottom 5% of their workforce,
yeah,
I think that's, to be honest, normal. People were saying like, "Oh, it's like Jack Welch, like blah blah blah," but these companies, they grew dramatically over the last couple of years, like especially since COVID, because they assumed that people are going to spend more time at home online. I guess they did a lot of hiring. Maybe they were concerned that they weren't going to hire enough people or something. I don't know what the fuck was happening. And they hired a lot of people, especially from these boot camps that were like those people who were graduating, learning how to write like basic JavaScript code, and that was their own function. Oh, how funny! But by the way, you get why they're firing these people too, right?
No, I don't.
If you're a basic bootcamp graduate, chances are you're not making it to Facebook. But a lot of these people, especially a lot of the people who are coming here with like fake diplomas from India, and yes, those are fake. A lot of them are. It's a serious problem in India. A lot of them have skills no better than ChatGPT or one of these LLMs.
Fair enough.
So as a result, I think what they're finding is rather than hiring new developers, they either need to pay more money to their existing developers to work with these LLMs and assistants, or they can just let go because they hire hundreds of, like, think about it. How many people do you think it takes to develop Facebook?
I actually have no idea. Like 1,000 people?
Yeah, well,
500 people?
They're firing like 5,000.
I see.
And that's like 5%.
I see.
Or something.
3,500 was
3,500.
5%.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's 5%.
Yeah. So.
And that's engineers. 3,500 engineers. What are they engineering? Have you seen Facebook?
Yeah, it's pretty basic, right?
Yeah, what are they engineering?
No idea.
So I think that's the point. I think this is why they're letting go of people. But I don't know if they need to coach it in the feminine energy, blah, blah, blah. I think it's... if you're gonna lay off people because you don't need that many people, I think they have like 70,000 people.
70,000 people, yeah. I can't do maths, so I had to do that. Oh, that's a very, very, very large workforce.
But not as large as it used to be, right?
They used to have 100?
No, not them specifically, but a company of that size. Remember how like a company of that size would of the size that Facebook is in terms of market capitalization, in terms of how much market they have, would have like 1 million people back in the day. Right?
But it's a software company, and I thought software companies
larger leverage.
Yeah.
But it's like somebody pointed out, with that large leverage, when you have like a larger leverage of employee to like the amount of money that they're bringing to your company, it's that much more critical not to hire idiots.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they have a large leverage going one way, but they have large leverage going down as well.
I wonder if it's like getting into, I have heard that it's like getting into a prestigious university, getting into one of these large tech companies in Silicon Valley. It's hard to get into it, but once you're there, it's pretty easy to.
Well, apparently they're showing that that's not the case, right?
Based on this.
Well, based on this.
Yeah. Okay.
And we know that they fired tech lead, but I'm sure they hated him.
Oh my God, that guy is awful.
Stop hating a tech lead.
I mean, I think all of his team would hate him because he's autistic and he tells people things just as they are, and people apparently cannot take this as, they need the social softness. What is it called? The social delicacies or graces to be exercised.
And maybe this is why Mark Zuckerberg is concerned that there's too much feminine energy in these companies.
Oh, I see. Huh. I see what you mean. If we assume that, for instance, Zuckerberg is autistic or whatever, and like the people around him are autistic and they tell things as they see them, then all these social graces of people worrying about each other would be quite.
But notice that these social graces, like
overwhelming.
Many people can
or bullshitty. In other words.
Many people can like prefer them, but let it go for people who don't follow some of those social graces, right? And it's usually
it depends. If their work output is fantastic, sure. But if their work output does not justify their horrible social graces, no. Although that, I actually don't think that's true, because in medicine that usually isn't true.
Well, my point is that there is one type of person who chooses to concentrate on that specific thing and chooses to concentrate on social graces, who makes a big deal out of it. And that's specifically the Catwoman that on the screen right now. It's the leeches who are leeching off of the company, because it's important for them to make a big deal, especially over social graces of somebody who's has a particularly high output, because they don't want to be judged against that person on the output. So instead they're like, well, look how kind and nice and how many cupcakes I bring to the office. Unlike that terrible person who never brings any cupcakes, and don't look at their output. And what I'm saying is,
oh, that's fascinating.
These types of people our companies are full of them.
I see. I wonder if these cat people really hate neurally divergent people. Because neurally divergent people are like, I'm neurally divergent. I can say things as I want to. I'm making an effort to be more socially graceful, but I'm sorry, I don't do things the way you neurally typical people do. No,
but that a lot of them hide behind that as well. They can hide behind many different masks. That's just one of the yet again rings on the pyramid of oppression. So neurally divergent people can be somewhere in the pyramid of right here, and all they have to do, a proper Catwoman would just like start defending the rights of autistic people. But what they do is they climb on top of the head of the autistic person and sit there so they can be on top of the pyramid. That's how it always works. We had a mutual acquaintance who always was going around defending the rights of the Native Americans, so he can climb on top of their head and get all of the victimhood points that come to them, and then have them flow directly to him instead. That's how these people work.
I think 2 of them. I think we need 2 of them.
Yes.
Anyways, is there anything else we want to add here?
I guess I did a bad job. Maybe we'll come back to the subject some other time. I did a bad job kind of convincing, I think, myself and others that I've proven this point right here. I think this is very important because I think this is a kind of a curve that always happens. I think there's actually a quote on it from a famous economist that says that in the lifetime of every corporation, it starts to be predominantly occupied by people who care about like their own needs over the needs of the corporation. It escapes my mind. So maybe we can talk about it from that perspective, because I think the feminism perspective, I think this type of tendency has a tendency to use feminism as a shield, but I think it has very little to do with feminism and women in general.
I definitely agree with you. I think it's just easy to think about workplace dynamics in feminine and masculine terms. Maybe it's what the MAGA is used to or what people are used to. But I think it's utterly inappropriate for actually describing the dynamics of the workplace and the different approaches that different tasks require.
Though you do have to agree, though, I have to ask this, that in a lot of cases, these types of people do have a certain phenotype, and they do look in a certain way, and they do have a tendency to own cats, probably because cats are the only creatures who can stand them.
I fear that I might sound like a misogynist. I agree with you. I recently read a novel about what I would deem a very stifling woman to her nephew, and I was like, oh my god, like this person really wants to crush all individuality, all in good, like all like her desires to be the best aunt possible. And to make like being in prison.
I suppose. I'm not sure how that relates to Catwoman.
I feel like Catwoman is somebody who wants to stifle all individuality.
Well, individuality is dangerous, so I guess I agree with you there. Yes. I mean, from their perspective.
And so and I do believe that a certain part of them thinks that whatever they believe is for the best. For the company and for themselves.
For themselves, I don't know. I don't think any of them believe that anything is better for the company. I don't think they care about the company to even think about it.
All right, then they believe that it's good for the victims they're fighting for. Then.
Again, I think they're more callous than that. I know it's more nice to believe that people actually fully convince themselves of these little lies that they tell themselves, but I think some of them don't. I think some of them are just callously going through the motions to protect themselves and their jobs, and they're actually making the calculations like, if I make this protest right now, I won't have to do that, and nobody will find out that I actually don't know what UX is.
It's terrible, but I'm willing to hold my disbelief and actually think that these people are pretty callous.
All right, I reserve the right to come back to this topic because I feel like I did not so great on this topic today.
Or we were not very focused and clear.
And I think we can try again. And since we have a regular talk show, I think we can come back to it. Let me jump to our questions.
Oh. Since
we did a poor job doing this, I think we kind of did a good job covering this.
Mm-hmm.
The upshot of DeepSeek conversation is that I think NVIDIA is going to rebound. This is a kind of a stupid reaction, in my opinion. I'm not a big NVIDIA fan. We have some NVIDIA stock, but I'm not like one of these people who thinks that they're amazing and yada yada. But they're a good company, and that's a silly reason to sell them. If you want a good reason to sell them, notice the fact that the DeepSeek R1, maybe next time we do a podcast, I can actually try to show people what it looks like running these locally, directly on my computer, and we can see what the performance is, even locally. So I think, if anything, NVIDIA should be concerned about the fact that Apple and some other custom SoC manufacturers could catch up to them in terms of their compute hardware. But to sell NVIDIA on the assumption that all of a sudden we won't need as much compute, that is simply idiotic.
Okay.
In terms of feminism, we've decided that it's the Catwomen that I hate so much at the workplace, even though I contend that a lot of them women who own cats.
But they can also be males.
They can be anybody, and it's a specific type of person that I think is dragging down the American corporations. But I decided that we can come back to it because I think I didn't do such a great job defining just who these people are.
Okay.
Other than that, they're always... Basically, if you want to identify them in your company, think about whoever you would think is the biggest victim in your company based on their own self-assessment. And that would be the person who is the Catwoman in your company.
Okie dokie.
And let's look at our questions.
I thought we could do the one about, is cancel culture a positive or a negative phenomenon?
Okay, you start then.
Cancel culture is a positive or a negative phenomenon. I think I don't care. I think cancel culture is a negative phenomenon because I think that people who get canceled don't get a voice, like don't get to defend themselves. And I think that's generally a negative in society. If you accuse somebody of, for instance, like sexual harassment, like Kevin Spacey, and he doesn't get a moment to respond in the media, I think that ruins a lot of people's lives without necessarily being
And then
true.
he goes to court, and in court he's found not guilty. So
right, but that day in court isn't nearly as publicized.
no, I know, but I'm just
right.
highlighting that for people that
Right.
he actually did go to court, and they found him not guilty in court. So there was a completely unjustifiable cancellation, so to speak. Of I mean, there they literally canceled him, as in they canceled his TV show that he was like the main actor on.
Yeah,
They canceled.
but there's other
what's
people.
the TV show?
I don't remember.
Power something. He was the president. Anyways.
What about you? What do you think about cancel culture? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends. It really does depend, because it depends on what do you mean by cancel culture? Because by cancel culture you might mean like letting go of Kevin Spacey from House of Cards. From House of Cards. Before you even get a chance to hear like what the accusation is about, our court system is takes way too long to run through these cases. So I think that's a bit of a problem, but generally speaking, they kind of dropped him from that TV show even before any evidence was brought to demonstrate that the accuser was telling the truth. So I think in many cases, it really does depend. But at the same time, I can see why a corporation, for instance, could fire an employee if that employee is engaged in some kind of controversy that might cause the corporation to lose face. Right? So like if an employee goes to, I don't know, some kind of Black Lives Matter protest with like signs that say Black Lives Don't Matter or something like that, like, and that makes the corporation look bad in front of the, the
shareholders
or
the
public, and so on and so forth.
And generally ruins the reputation of that. So basically,
but should a corporation be represented by its employees during their non-corporate work hours? Like if a McDonald's employee does something but then he goes to McDonald's and he just does his work exactly how he's supposed to do it, should it matter that he's also a Nazi?
It depends on whether it's affecting his work performance.
But what if it doesn't?
Whether he's discriminating against people
What
of
if
color.
what if he doesn't at work? At work, he's like, well, they're paying me to serve everybody, so I'm going to serve everyone. But in my private life,
I wish to discriminate.
I wish to kill all of you people.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Maybe he's a very conscientious Nazi. He's like, I do my work, they pay me money, and I do it very properly, just like they told me. If they told me to serve black people, I serve black people, though, quite honestly, I do not see how that's even appropriate. Should we then fire that guy? Like, I think, like, a part of me says yes, because I don't want to be associated with a Nazi, but on the other hand, I don't know.
If he's performing his job adequately, I don't see why we should fire him, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would depend on the culture of the nature of the organization you're working for, of the company you're working for. If, for instance, you're working in a software company and you're a Nazi, how would that affect your performance as how would it affect your company?
I can see going both ways on this, though, because it really does depend on the deviation from the norm that these people are exhibiting, right? So somebody, like, for instance, could be a murderer, right, who, like, just likes killing people, and they just haven't proven yet. They haven't caught him yet in action, but everybody knows that no, that doesn't make sense. But like, there are people who are just like bad people, and you wouldn't want to be around. But then there's people who get cancelled by cancelled I mean get fired from their jobs, or get demoted, or like or get harassed by people for just having different opinions, for having like for instance, those people in Colorado who were harassed for not wanting to make a gay cake. But they were just like one bakery out of thousands who could have made that cake. They didn't have any like weird signs or anything like that in their shop. They just simply said, "Hey, we don't want to make a cake for a gay wedding."
Yeah. And they didn't deserve to be canceled, right?
Yeah, like
because they could serve a small subsection of the community who doesn't believe in homosexual relationships due to their religious.
No, but my point is that
beliefs.
they can also serve like the larger subset of the community who just likes cakes and doesn't care where those cakes come from, because they're not expressing their ideology with like animosity. They're not going out there protesting gay weddings. They're just simply saying, we don't want to participate in gay weddings. So I think it would be different if there was like a bakery who was also organizing like protests against gay weddings in their time off, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to draw attention to and kind of like ruin the business of that bakery, then by all means that makes sense, because they're intentionally going out of their way to be political, so to speak, right? But
yeah, that could go both ways actually, because that business could have gotten technically more business from people who are pro-Christian or anti-gay.
I think maybe, but I think they were struggling or whatever. But one way or the other, I just don't think that's worth our attention. So same thing like with men, like that guy who lost his job. I forgot what his name is. Was it Larry Summers? Who lost his job over the IQ differences between men and women.
I don't remember IQ, but I certainly remember that women have predispositions to not like, for instance, certain things.
No. It was the Harvard chairman like meeting, and he was there as the chairman of the economics department. I think it was Larry. Like he was one of our.
Yes, he did make some comments about something or the other,
and he made a comment that they were saying how they were talking about how like in their maths and in their economics departments it's like so many men and not as many women, and he made a point saying that, well, don't you know that at the high end, and they are talking specifically about the very, very high end of mathematics, where people are like with IQs of 150 or more, right? He's like, at the high ends, there's more men than women, essentially.
You're right. Okay.
And what he meant by that.
I think you need to switch screens if you
Oh,
are painting for us.
Oh.
I'm looking this up on my phone. He was the Harvard president.
yeah, president of Harvard. We could have looked it up on the computer.
You can teach us.
Well-
Meanwhile, while I look it up.
Well,
Yeah.
I would rather we look at it together.
Yes, he made comments about women in math.
Yeah. Well, may I now continue
Sure.
since you confirmed it?
Yeah. Okay, you can tell us more
And-
about it.
So all he did is he made a comment that if you look at the standard population distribution chart, so on this axis right here, you have the IQ. So this would be like low IQ, like let's say 50, and this would be like 150. Will be high IQ, and this will be like 100. We usually center IQ around 100, right, for American population. And if we look at women, for instance, then you will see, and this is incontrovertible, like this is, you can map this, that there's a few women that are kind of like on the stupid side, then everybody primarily is like right around 100, and goes down like that, and tapers off towards 150 and towards the 50, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what this represents on the right side, on the left side rather, is the population. How many people in the population actually have that IQ. And for men, the difference is that the tails are fatter. So the fat tails means that men kind of start lower, and then they have a fatter progression. Not as many men are in the center, but likewise, men kind of taper out to this side. So as you can see, in the very, very center, most men are as smart as most women. There is no difference. But on these tails over here, hold on a second. We're having technical difficulties. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that.
So men are represented by the red pen.
Yes, and women
Okay.
are represented by the blue line. And the point that I was trying to make is that the tails are much fatter on the men on both sides. So there's a lot more men who are dumber than the average and a lot more men who are smarter than the average. And these end up in Harvard. And these end up in jail. So the point is that what he was making is that it's understandable that there is more men than there is women in the Harvard's economics department or mathematics department if the department pulls primarily from this 150 IQ region. And if you zoom in into that 150 IQ region, it's primarily men there, not women. Not because there's no smart women, and not because women on average are dumber than men. On average, they're the same. If we, again, draw the line through the center, they're the same. But if we look at where the Harvard pulls the applicants from, they're not quite the same in that region.
I see. So there are more outliers on the...
There are more outlier men than there are outlier women.
I see.
There are equally more outlier men in the other direction. But the other direction nobody cares about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. So my attitude is irrelevant to this. The guy made a very accurate, very I would say scientific point. This is not controversial. Like this is actual numbers. This is quite exaggerated in terms of the actual difference. The difference is much smaller. But the difference at the tail ends is that where you would have like 4 times more men than women at these very extreme tails. And as a result of him just pointing this out as reality, he lost his job as the president of Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the kind of cancellation and the kind of cancel culture that I think is not okay. So it's difficult because on one side, we don't want to say no one should ever be canceled for any reason. Some people should say really terrible things and nobody should want to be their friend as a result of that. But at the same time, I think it's important.
If somebody states a truth that is just unsavory or inconvenient at the time, right?
Yeah.
They shouldn't be canceled.
Yeah, especially if it's not an action, it's just a thought, right? Like it's a thought based on data.
Yeah.
It's not, he wasn't found to discriminate against women or anything like that. He just stated this is probably why we don't have as many women in this department. He wasn't saying we shouldn't have as many women in this department. He was just saying if we choose to pull people from this very narrow region, right, we are going to end up with more men than women purely for reasons of biology. And
well, that's interesting. That's like having a bag or a basket of socks, and some of them are red and some of them are blue, and it just turns out that there's on average more red ones than there are blue ones, so you will
just pick up more red ones.
Yeah.
Unless you start discriminating against the red ones on purpose.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that question, or
we should leave that for next time. Is that okay?
Okay.
Because
I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, we can hold off on that one.
And I should prepare for that one.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. We'll try to come back tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Oh, look at that. We didn't have sound. Okay. Stop.